Hello, and welcome to episode 46 of the PowerScore LSAT podcast. This is John Dinning in Los Angeles.
And this is Dave Kaloran in Napa Valley.
Both of us happily quarantined away.
Very much quarantined. I have been for a week, so I'm all good.
I feel you. Yeah, this is a very involuntary house arrest. And I'm going slowly stir crazy, if I can.
I think it's a big surprise to you, so.
I don't like this one bit.
So what are you drinking then today?
Well, I think you and I have agreed to both drink the same thing, a little tongue-in-cheek, a Corona.
Gotta have
ice
some
cold
beer.
Corona, yeah.
Corona. I feel bad for Corona because I've heard their sales have dropped.
Really?
Due to the association with coronavirus, which I find that ridiculous. You'd think sales would be at least, they'd increase because people are like, I'm going to have to stay in and drink, but now they're mad at Corona for having the same name.
Well, look, you and I are clearly not to blame. We're doing our part.
Well, next year when there's a Heineken virus, you know what'll happen to Heineken sales.
I know what we'll be drinking. So,
Heineken.
There we go. Yeah.
Well, in honor, I suppose, or perhaps deference to the many lockdowns that are now being set around the country, what's the music of the day?
Yeah, the good old social distancing. We have chosen a song, an old song by The Police, and it's perfect. Don't stand so close to me.
Which is really not a song about, social distancing, as the video makes clear. But I will say this, I'm not a huge Police fan on a lot of different levels. And at least musically, I've never been a big Stig fan, but I really think this song is great. And it was groundbreaking when it came out. It's so cool, like the first minute of this song. You can tell why it was a big hit when it first came out.
Not a fan of Sting?
No, not really. He's talented. This isn't a knock on him or his ability. Just a lot of his music never really moved me.
I gotcha.
So nothing against him. Like if I met him, I'd be like, you're incredibly talented. That doesn't mean I necessarily love the music that he's producing.
Fair enough.
But he's got his skills, no doubt.
Yeah, he does. And endurance. Let's talk about the LSAT world. That's clearly the main theme of today.
That's true. Although we went through a lot of different songs to get to the Police song. Mm-hmm. I think I'll just list a few of them. Tame Impala's Solitude is Bliss, which I was supposed to see Tame Impala on Friday night. That got canceled, so sucks.
Did it get canceled officially, or did you just opt out?
No, it got canceled officially. San Francisco had shut down by then, and that show was sold out. It was going to be like 25,000 people, so they probably did the right thing. Yeah. Billy Idol's Dancing with Myself. It's a good one.
That's a great one.
Garbage is classic. I think I'm Paranoid. The Motel's a really early 80s classic. Only the Lonely.
Yeah.
And then a personal favorite of mine, Alice in Chains, Down in a Hole.
Yeah, I came up on old Alice in Chains, and that's a special one. I'll circle back to one that you mentioned, the Garbage song. I think I'm Paranoid. Because if we had this conversation, say, 7, 8, 10 days ago, I probably would have given you a lot harder time about some of your predictions.
Yeah.
But it turns out, my God, man, you've been on the money about literally every single thing that's occurred so far.
I'm sorry about that.
No, I know that you actually are. It's nice to be right. It sucks to be right about these things.
I think I said to you earlier today, I wish I wasn't right about this, but yeah. I've been tracking this for a couple months and certainly not the only one who was concerned about it. But I think I told you a while ago, I was like, you're going to look down on the busy street that's near you, and you're going to see like one car every couple of minutes, and you're like, no way. And already that's happened.
It's true.
It came up fast.
Yeah, I told you that this morning. It's eerily silent on Santa Monica Boulevard. Out the window there. It's a ghost town in Beverly Hills. Yeah. It's so strange.
Well, on that strange note, which is definitely a strange discussion that we're about to have, let's talk about the LSAT world, and then we'll get to the biggest news of the day in terms of what has happened. The minor news was that they actually put out a new podcast, their March version of it, episode 17 of the Keeping Up to Data, which I actually laughed about because it came in at 3 minutes and 17 seconds. So I was like, 3 for March, 17 for episode 17. Tricky work there.
Yeah, and also a happy St. Paddy's Day number.
Yep. However, that's not intentional, we know. I'm finding it in there. There's very little of value in this from a numerical standpoint because there's not a whole lot going on other than admissions right now. But finally, I think the truth is starting to hit home, which is that applicants and applications are starting, they're down compared to last year.
Yeah.
So at least as far as ABA schools, the number of people applying is down 3.1%, and the number of applications they're putting in is down 2.7%. So fewer people, they're putting in slightly more applications, but still, because there are fewer of them, overall the total of applications is going down. And as I've mentioned before, if you are applying this year and you've got your applications in, this is actually a good thing. Mm-hmm. You want fewer competitors for the available spots. What you don't want is a massive surge in applicants where there's more and more people trying to get the same spots, because that increases competition, raises numbers, makes it harder for any individual person to get in.
Yeah, that is one of the few pieces of good news that we'll have for you today.
Yeah. Another piece of good news is that by the time this podcast is posted, February LSAT scores should be out the door and in people's hands. So that's always a welcome moment for many people, and those February scores may be the last scores that we see for a while here. So hopefully,
as we'll get to.
Hopefully, if you took that test, you did well, and you can walk away pleased that your LSAT journey is over. But Jon and I will be around in case you get those scores back. If anybody needs to talk to us about that, we're always all over various forums and social media. So
yeah, officially they're set to come out starting around 9 a.m. Eastern on the 17th of March, which is probably when this is going to go live. So if you're listening to this, you may already have a number if you took the February 2020 test.
Hopefully so. If not, it should be in your hands relatively soon. But I do think the scores will be out before this is actually fully posted.
And I don't think any of the general madness in the air, as it were, is going to have any effect on the score release.
Me neither.
Okay. I've been asked that question a lot, but I think it's going to be business as usual in terms of that.
These scores are already in the vault. They're ready to go. They just have to flip the switch at 9 a.m. They can do that remotely. I don't think this is going to be affected in any way by the coronavirus situation.
Yeah.
However, that is not the case for the March LSAT.
Yeah, which is really what we want to talk about today.
Yeah. The last piece of the LSAT world is actually the entire topic that we're going to cover here, and it is the point-blank news that the March LSAT has been canceled. Not postponed, not delayed by a week. It's over and done with. Yeah. They're not going to hold it at all.
Full stop.
Yeah. Now, let's be honest. This was the right decision by them. This is one that we've been waiting for them to make. I was saying a couple days ago, as were you, that they needed to cancel it. They just hadn't pulled the trigger yet because they still had some time. And last night, I posted a tweet where I said something to the effect of, if I were LSAC, I would cancel March and April. Think about putting a May test in there and start talking to law schools about the fact that this is an extraordinary situation that we're dealing with, and that maybe law schools should elongate the admissions window here to allow for the loss of these, at least one, possibly two LSATs. And it was kind of cool because I got immediate traction.
Yeah.
And, a lot of commentary was around it. And so I was like, I wonder if they'll react. And the first thing I got this morning when I woke up was an email from them saying, would you meet with us, please? And I wasn't the only person that got this email, but my first response was, read my tweet, did you?
Yep. In fact, as we'll see looking at the release that they put out, not only did they read your tweet, but I don't think it's too far afield to say that they were inspired by it.
I think it was a roadmap for them, which, fantastic. Borrow from what, you like from other people.
Of course. If you ever feel underappreciated, now at least LSAC is watching.
Well, they definitely are. They're paying attention. And to be honest with you, I love that.
Me too.
I've talked about the fact that there's old LSAC and there's new LSAC. When Kelly Testy came in, she brought a whole bunch of administrators with her that really... they have a new approach to it. And sometimes, I feel like they're still learning the ropes as far as some of the specifics of this, but their attitude towards dealing with, I think, the public and people such as ourselves who do this professionally is so much more open than it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago. And so I can't really overstate how much I appreciate the change in attitude. I'm certainly not the only one out here who's noticed that either.
Yeah. You and I have talked about this at length previously, that they do seem to be at least pointed in the right direction. They don't always get it right, but I think their ambitions are admirable for the most part.
That's exactly right. I also think they're really nice. You know, that's one of the cool things is after I had the meeting this morning, I thought to myself, I could go to a dinner party with everybody on this phone call and have enjoyed myself. You know, they're pleasant. They're interesting. I love that because sometimes in the past I was like, I don't know who I'm dealing with here. They don't seem completely human. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah,
so,
I'm sure there's some fair percentage of listeners hearing that right now being like, no, I hate them. They're jerks. I wanted March. We'll talk about why they made this decision. But for the most part, I think what you and I are complimenting them on is the fact that they do seem to be making a more concerted effort.
Yeah, they're doing the work. I know their intentions are good. Exactly. In the meeting this morning, I was fortunate enough to talk to Kelly Testy, and one of the things I always think about when I listen to her talk is that she is very sincere. Mm-hmm. You know, I think she's very reassuring. She's the right person to head up their operation at this time. I know she has vision. I know she has goals. But when you talk to her, you don't get the feeling that you're dealing with somebody who's being dishonest or insincere. Yeah. I sense that she means what she says. She really does wish for the best. And really, that's among the best things you could ask for with somebody, to have vision and then also to really mean it. So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I like that. And clearly this decision that they've made is in the interest of their customers, of their students and clients, as we'll discuss.
It was the right decision. Yeah. And I think the great thing about this morning was it was clear to me that they were trying to gather information to make sure they got it right. Mm-hmm. And they knew people were talking about it. They knew there was some pressure. Certainly, I'd put some on them. But their goal here wasn't to be like, I was like, could I be getting a difficult time from them? No. My wife was like, are you in trouble? I was like, I don't think so. I laughed about it. I was like, it's really hard to get me in trouble at this point.
Yeah, but I think you're not entirely bulletproof, but you're awfully close.
No, and I thought they were quite cool, and I loved the approach, which is help us. You know, do we have everything here? And I was like, you do, and I'm sure you've heard from other people that you're on the right track with this.
Yeah. Well, look, if ever there was a time for like community, this is really it, and we're a part of this community when it comes to students. So.
Yeah, definitely. So they sent out an email that had a ton of content that they communicated to law schools, to companies like ours that help people with the test, as well as people who are registered for the test. So I think we should go through that and talk. Just initially, let's outline what it is that they said had actually happened.
Perfect.
You want to cover that, or do you want me to?
We can bounce through it together, as we typically do. I mean, I suppose the first most salient thing is that everyone who was registered for the test in the U.S., Canada, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, all of them have had their March test date canceled, and they have all been automatically registered for the test on April 25th in the same community, presumably the same center that they were originally registered for in March. And everyone else who was registered for March test has been moved to June. That's typically the more international people.
Exactly. So that was the first big piece of news. Test is canceled. You've been pushed to April.
Yeah. Well, that's an important thing, though, because they've automatically re-registered people, as opposed to leaving it completely open-ended. If you can't test in April, you're going to actually have to make some moves here to change your situation around, to contact them and get yourself adjusted.
And let's talk a little bit about, maybe we should wait on that, because the automatic movement hasn't quite happened as of the time of this recording.
Yeah, fair. In fact, these big points of their announcement, we should probably just bounce back through them and give our take on each one after we've covered it. Is that
afterwards?
Fair?
Yeah.
All right.
So then the second point that they made was that they are hopeful that April and June will be able to go forward. So they did not cancel either of those two tests. They did say that they're going to monitor the situation and provide updates. And interestingly, in our conversation this morning, one of the things I suggested to them, which they then took under advisement, was I said, give a timeline. Tell people when you're going to make the decision so that they at least know. And then they did that. And so interestingly, the different versions of the message that they sent out to different groups, some of them have the April 10th deadline, which is when they said they are going to decide by. Some of them don't. So it was kind of cool. That was one of the things I appreciated. I'm talking to you guys, you're listening, and you liked the idea and you jumped on it.
Yeah, it was good advice, and good on them for taking it.
Very good. So what was the next point?
Point number 3 is they're looking, I think this whole situation obviously bears continued monitoring and scrutiny, but I believe the quote was something along the lines of, we're exploring options to administer the LSAT in alternative ways that'll best protect the health, the well-being of test takers in the broader community. These alternatives, they listed a few, they can include secure remote proctored tests, an additional spring or summer administration, which is interesting, and other options, which is more open-ended, that would meet evolving public health guidelines.
Yeah.
Which is all really to say that they're not necessarily limited to just the tests on the calendar at this point, or to giving tests in the traditional format only.
Yeah, more to come on that for sure.
Yeah.
And then the last point, which echoed my tweet pretty well, was we are working with our member law schools that are still accepting applications for fall 2020 to help expand flexibility on deadlines. And I hope actually that what happens here is that law schools will expand deposit deadlines, for example, and give a greater window to students to make decisions. Mm-hmm. I think right now law schools are like, why should I worry about that? In another week to 2 weeks, they're going to understand that this is an extraordinary situation that the country is entering into. And then we'll start to see law schools saying, hey, it's okay. Right now, especially undergraduate institutions are still being a little bit hardline. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you just don't get it. You really don't get what's happening in this country and what's about to happen. This is going to look like a movie very quickly here. So,
yeah. I mean, it's true. Both the severity and the longevity, I think people are still underestimating in a lot of ways.
That's exactly right. So now that was really the meat of this email that they sent out to all sorts of different groups, those 4 points. So let's kind of talk through some of these and maybe go through some of the more specific questions that we've seen out there.
Yeah, because we've gotten a lot on all 4 of these, really.
Oh, yeah. There's been questions. I've been taking questions on it all day.
Me too.
And it sure seems like in the last year, it's been tumultuous. There's always some kind of new, heart-stopping announcement that's going on. This has been in the last year. Now, I don't mean just the calendar year of 2019, but since, last spring till now, it's been really wild LSAT times. Feels like the Wild West to me.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. It's like a Truman Capote novel out there at the moment. So I'm terrified and fascinated, frankly. Let's break these 4 down then and give our maybe deconstruction of each.
All right. So we know March is gone. So the next thing that comes up is April.
Yeah.
And the very first question that we got, I think within seconds, was, what do you think happens with April?
Yeah.
What's your personal assessment?
I mean, as much as things are still in flux with this and have changed in the last week, if the trajectory we're seeing is any indication of what's to come in the next, say, 4 to 6 weeks, I don't think April can happen. I don't see how they're going to run April. I think April's going to be canceled, in other words.
I do too. If there was a great LSAC casino in the sky where I could bet logical money, I would be putting a lot of money on April not happening.
Yeah.
And that's not alarmist, that's just realist. LSAC is in a position where they've just bought themselves until April 10th before they have to make any kind of comment to this effect. So insofar as they're concerned, they don't feel any pressure to make an announcement. And I actually understand that decision. There is no urgency to say you can't take the LSAT in April right now. And yes, I know there's somebody out there who's like, but I'm spending a lot of time studying. My response to that is, good.
Yeah.
Keep doing that. Just because you're front loading your studying from a preparation standpoint, I'm loving that.
Yeah.
But realistically, do I think it'll happen? I don't think so.
Yeah, you and I have both made that comment, which is a little backhanded in a way, on Twitter, which is, yeah, it sucks that these tests are being canceled, but try to find the bright side in it, which is that the work you're doing now is still valuable. It's still improvement. These aren't skills that go away if you have more time to consider them. They get better. So if it ends up being pushed to June, or we'll talk more about the chance of like a May test, that's that's a bummer on the one hand, but there is an opportunity to be had in this. Try to see the opportunity.
We all know how important an extra point or 2 on this test can be. You've got a situation where a lot of people are going to be spending time at home and maybe use it to study. I realize it's not the most enjoyable thing always, but turn it into a silver lining.
Yeah, exactly. The corner I have turned in this whole debacle, in your direction, largely because of you, in fact, Dave, is I don't see things getting better in the next month. I see things getting much, much worse. And that's typically not my worldview on things. You know me. I tend to be a pretty rose-tinted guy, but this is one that I just can't. I can't ignore what now feels obvious.
Well, you just have to look at Italy, and the situation there is deeply problematic and concerning, and the lack of testing in this country. It's just, there's a lot of people walking around who do not realize that they have this, and they're spreading it unbeknownst to them. And so I think we're going to see a huge rise in cases once we start testing. And so that's why when we look at these tests that are 6 weeks away and somebody says, well, it's 6 weeks from now, how can you know? I don't know. But I suspect that when we're trying to lock this down as a society, and that's the smart thing to do, something as relatively unimportant as an LSAT is going to be a casualty of this.
Yeah, they've canceled my beloved Masters. And if the Masters can be canceled, anything's fair game.
Which was a funny conversation because you were like, I'm flying to Augusta and the Masters. I was like, you're not going.
Yeah, you told me that way before I thought it was real. And I've canceled the trip. It's also my poor mom's 70th birthday. And I was like, the last birthday present I ever want to give her is my latent coronavirus.
Don't get her sick. Exactly. But I knew the Masters wasn't going to happen. And then you're like, well, now they're not going to have spectators. I'm like, no, they're not having
They're not going to have a tournament. They're postponing it. It sounds like they might have moved it maybe to October. So who knows? Maybe I get a birthday Masters, which would be fine.
Maybe you do.
But regardless, yeah, if they can cancel things like that, then an LSAT, 1 of 9 this year or whatever it is, seems pretty trivial.
Yeah, and I realize how important it is for people who are applying, and this was their last chance. I'm not trivializing that. I'm just saying that.
That's not what I mean, but
compared to it, no, you weren't either, really. So either way, one of the things that has come up is that with everybody being pushed from March to the April test, you saw students who were like, well, my count doesn't show that. That's not surprising. Hopefully by now it's been updated, but if it hasn't, I'm still not concerned about it. They, this morning, were talking about this decision and making the announcement. They made the announcement first, then they start transferring the system. They don't make the transfer because then people would call them up and be like, I was scheduled for March and now it's April. So they have to announce it first, but these are systems that are very complex with a ton of people inside them that have to be worked through. So if you haven't been transferred to April yet automatically, don't worry. Don't call them immediately and be like, where's my transfer? It's going to happen. Now, if you have some other issue, go ahead and give them a call, but give them a little bit of time to make this change. We've seen this in the past when this happened. Like they announced the July LSAT at one point rather late, and it wasn't available for registration at that point. Right. These things happen. They're running a little bit behind this year because of all the problems from last year. So if you haven't been transferred over, it's okay. Another thing we saw was refunds.
Perfect.
Can I get a refund? They didn't mention it.
Yeah, that was my question for you is what happens if you're transferred to April but can't take it, don't want to take it, you're just going to roll with your current situation as it stands. Maybe you've already applied, but we're taking March to try to improve, but the list of possibilities goes on. What happens to those people now registered for April who don't want to test then?
I would be stunned if a refund was not made available to them.
Yeah, I don't think they've announced anything publicly about refunds, but they just canceled a test. They have to give you your money back.
Given the fact that they were still working through the basic policy this morning, I think if someone had mentioned it to them, they would have included it. It just wasn't on their radar because they're like, have we got the big points down? Right. They're going to be reasonable here. They're not going to keep money for people who got a test canceled and then auto-transferred to a later one. So if you do need to get that refund from April because you didn't originally sign up for it, like I said, I'd be shocked if they didn't give that back to you.
Or international students who've now been pushed all the way to June. Again, same deal.
Yeah, it's a casualty that they'll have to deal with, and it's unfortunate, but I'm positive that they'll do the right thing here. So I feel pretty comfortable with that.
Perfect. So another point that they made in there is that they're looking at other ways to administer this test. And they actually gave a couple of different listed points of new administrations, online or remotely proctored tests, etc. Let's look at some of those.
Let's talk about that.
All right.
You want to talk about new administrations, or you want to talk about online?
Honestly, the first question that I got as soon as this announcement came out is, do you think I could test in May instead? And it's a good question. It's a fair question. It accords with kind of what they've hinted at, but my suspicion is whether or not April goes forward, there's not going to be a May LSAT this year.
Yeah, the April test was April 30th. So to have a mid-May test or even a third week of May test, they'd have to know just logistically by like April 20th or so at the latest. And so that would put them in the curious position of being like, well, we think we can have a test in a month, but we still can't have a test in a week or two.
Right.
I don't know that that's going to work out. It was one of the original suggestions. I was like, well, maybe have a May exam or at least talk about that. But having looked at the situation and certainly some of what the CDC has said in the last 24 hours, I doubt seriously we're looking at the possibility of a May administration.
Yeah, it's a strange sort of circumstance to add a test that in all likelihood they could then have to cancel.
Yeah. It's just too uncertain right now. And too many people are still walking around thinking, oh, everything's fine. This is just a little weird. I'm like, it's about to get way weirder out there. Trust me.
Again, a week ago, you and I had fought this one out, but I'm fully Team Dave now, unfortunately.
No, it's okay. Amanda came in earlier and she was like, you've been right about all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what to say about that. It just seemed pretty obvious to me that we could have a problem here. So maybe buy a few more groceries.
You know the depth of pain I feel in admitting something like that. But I've even admitted to you. So you're just spot on with everything you've said so far. Which means I guess I should really get comfortable here.
I told you the other day, could you please go buy more staples? And you went, and that was after I've been telling people for a while, hey, you need to kind of get ready because I think it could be a little bumpy
Staples in the sense of like toilet paper and toothpaste and canned soup, not...
Yeah, dude, get some rice and pasta maybe?
Yeah, not paper fasteners.
Yeah.
I realize that would be a confusing...
Not actual staples. Exactly. I'm using the old-timey definition of staples.
Yeah, so,
from the old dry goods store.
That's right. My cupboards are a little bare these days. It's going to get worrisome. It's going to get looterish around here if I'm not careful.
You don't know how screwed you are.
My poor neighbors don't know how screwed they are.
Cannibalism.
That's right. Desperate times, man.
Soylent Green, man.
It's going to be the Donner Party up in here. So... I don't think they're going to add May, in large part because, again, it's super short notice to try to accommodate that, but also because, again, it's just too uncertain to try to start putting things on a calendar that soon.
Yeah, so, which is unfortunate.
It is.
Now, they could lobby schools to say, look, if we can get June, across the line and we're actually able to hold that administration, it would be great if you law schools would extend your windows. Mm-hmm. And I realize that right now, certain schools, especially higher in the rankings, are feeling like we do what we want. We have all of our apps. But there's also a human component to all of this. Somebody was had applied to a school and the school was waiting for a March LSAT to kind of reevaluate or at least finally complete it. Is it really fair to punish them for the fact that all these events are happening out of their control? No, it's not, in my opinion. And I realize that someone could be like, well, that's just the way that it is. I'm like, sure, but law schools have the ability here to say, this is extraordinary times. We're going to take some measures that we normally wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so I hope that they do that. Every time I talk to someone in a law school at this point, I'm like, hey, what is your plan with this? And a lot of times what I've heard is, well, we haven't had to do anything yet, and we're kind of watching it and playing it by ear. I'm like, that's great, but now's the time to start actually taking a leadership role and saying we're going to do this. Be the NBA in the sports world in terms of doing this. Be a law school that comes out and says, no, this is a problem. We're going to extend everything because we want everybody to have as many opportunities as possible and to not have to put their lives on hold for a year.
Yeah, that kind of reassurance to students right now would go a long way. So I'm hoping we start to hear some stuff this week from schools about their plans.
I would love it.
Yeah.
I would love it.
So you mentioned June. We've both mentioned June a couple of times. Obviously, this is pure speculation, but what do you think the odds are that June could get canceled?
This becomes a lot more murky. Mm-hmm. Clearly the longer it goes out, you would hope that the chances would rise. I've seen various reports that say, the next month is going to be among the worst. Sometimes they talk about the very late spring. Earlier today, the president talked about this will be with us till July or August. If you look at pandemics that go back over time, it depends on how the response was and how quickly they locked things down. I'm hoping that they lock this country up tight very quickly and that it'll be a bitter pill to swallow, but it'll be harsh medicine that allows us to get well much more quickly.
You'll flatten the curve, as the saying goes.
That's what they're talking about right now. What I don't want to see is what I've seen so far, which is kind of like a laissez-faire, casual attitude, a minimal of testing, and people still seeming to think, oh, we can keep on doing this. You know, locally where I live, last night, there was, one of the groups around here was like, oh, let's have a big meeting. And I just thought to myself, that is utterly irresponsible that you would just ignore what's happening and act like you should go play ping pong or whatever it was they were up to. So I think all of a sudden the impact of what's occurring is really hitting home now, but people need to practice what they're telling you, which is social distancing. I realize a lot of people are like, well, I don't have to go to class every day, so I want to go out to the bar tonight. Really try not to do that. It's not you that I'm worried about. It's all the people that you know that concern me and the far-reaching effects of this.
Yeah.
So
this is neither here nor there, but a book on a bookshelf across the room just caught my eye. It's a book by Bill Nye, and the title is Undeniable. And I'm sitting here listening to you say all these things, and that's the thing that actually, out of my periphery, caught my eye. It's like, yeah, man.
It's all undeniable.
Yeah, it's pretty coincidental, but at the same time, undeniably true.
Yeah, you and I haven't really talked about this at all on the podcast, but I have very strong feelings about like how to respond to something like this.
I can tell you, just from a self-preservation sense, I'm glad we haven't talked about this on the podcast because I'd have a lot to apologize for. I was very, very much in the wrong for the majority of time.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I've had friends of mine here tell me I'm an alarmist and they don't want to hear it. And I'm like, don't call me for whatever it is you need. When
you stay out of my doomsday bunker.
I am not a doomsday bunkerist. So
Dave's got all the toilet paper in Northern California at this point.
Also, I'm not a hoarder, so I would not have done that. I did not rush out and buy that kind of stuff. That was mainly because we bought it months ago. I was like, there's going to be an issue. So we're fine.
Yeah. Anyway, like I said, I've come around. You've made a convert.
Good. Well, as far as June, I think it's almost like slightly reckless to speculate about it because I just don't know. Is there a possibility that's canceled? Oh, for sure. Yeah. Is that possibility greater than 1 or 2%? Definitely. Is it as certain as 99%? No. It's too far in advance for us to understand exactly what's going to happen socially and from a virality standpoint with this illness. So we'll know more as we get closer. And they don't have to make a decision on this. They're not going to. They'll give themselves the same 3-week window or so prior to the June test. So we're not going to hear anything for quite a while.
Yeah, we're a couple of months out from knowing anything more about that. I'm optimistic that it'll run, but at this point, I think it's probably a little reckless to speculate, which is why I asked you instead of doing it myself.
Well, I don't want to be like, I don't think it's going to happen. Right. And then all of a sudden it causes a lot of people consternation. It's uncertain. And that is enough consternation right there because that is an unusual situation to be like, well, we don't totally know.
Yeah. 3 tests. Well, now 2 tests down the road and we're still not sure if it's going to happen. That's crazy to me.
Well, that speaks to the incredibly unusual nature of what we're dealing with.
Yeah. Let's talk about, if you're up for it, another alternative that they mentioned. We've addressed the possibility of them adding a test, maybe in May, maybe even something later into the fall, like September. What about them testing or administering the LSAT in a different form, where people could do it, say, from home?
I saw some posts to this effect over the weekend, and certainly some very adamant posts like, we need the April test to be given. We need the March test, was what I heard somebody say, was we need the March test and the April test to be given online, just like they do with LSAT writing. And I responded to those comments, and I'm like, it's not that I disagree with that, because I would love to see that. Sure. I was just like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
You're living in fantasy land if you think they're going to take a test that they have deep security concerns about, and all of a sudden, in a matter of 6 weeks, turn it over so they put these tests into your hands in your house.
Yeah.
just on that count alone, I'm like, it's just not going to happen. Now, is it possible that it happens later? Yes, but it takes time. This is heavy level technology that they're dealing with. And I know they have good tech people there, but this is a far cry from the familiar site that they have, which doesn't even score your test.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about something completely different in terms of your experience. Now, they came out, and as you're referencing, they said in their message, hey, we're exploring it. Mm-hmm. And I heard that from them today. They're not promising anything, though. If this situation extends itself and starts dragging on for months and months, I do believe that we will see something like that. However, anybody who has taken the LSAT writing knows that so far, their flirtations with technology, and really it's more than a flirtation, they're married now. Their marriage with technology has been fraught with problems.
I was going to call it like a reckless courtship, but yeah. But yeah, fair.
Let's just say it was a short courtship and a shotgun marriage.
Shotgun wedding.
They saw the technology. They're like, you look good to me. Right. And the next thing you know, they
eloped.
Put a ring on it.
Yeah, I feel you. Anyone who's messed with the LSAT writing or has even paid much attention to it, I think is probably aware of the fact that it has not been without its difficulties.
And even when they were able to get people in a room on their own closed systems, they had a lot of problems, both expected and unexpected. Yeah. So this is not something where I think they're looking at it and they're like, in 6 weeks, we're going to go ahead and do it. Exploring it, but they promise nothing, and that is by far the wisest course for them. They can't promise something they don't haven't tested, and don't necessarily even know how they're going to execute it.
Yeah. Yeah, the language was precise for a reason in this.
Yeah. Now, if you look at the summertime or the late summer, I could see something coming, in that time frame. I think summer is still relatively early, but I will say this. When they decided that they were going to go to a digital LSAT, there is zero question that they looked at possible solutions that would allow someone to sit at home and take this test. So this isn't a new idea to them. This is certainly among the catalog of possibilities that they looked at and rejected. But they accepted it in part because that's how we got LSAT writing. They split that off from what it used to be. So I like that. I think that gives them an advantage here and a leg up. They're like, well, we've already looked at this. We have some experience with it. That shortens the timeline. So I have faith in the technology people there, and I've talked to several of them, and they know what they're doing. I just think it's a really big ask for anybody. So if this was Google and they're like, all right, we're going to put the LSAT online in 6 weeks, I'd be like, good luck.
Yeah.
So they don't have those type of resources. Understandably, nobody does really, except very few companies out there. And I don't see it happening. So those of you who are out there who are thinking, I want an online, in-person LSAT in my house and I want it fast, you're not getting it. Maybe you'll get it later. And certainly as time goes on, they may decide that that's a better way to deliver it. I think it's actually would be optimal, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime quickly. You got any disagreement with me on that?
That it would be optimal. Yeah, I mean, in principle, I don't disagree. In practice, from what I've seen, I can't help but disagree.
You mean?
I mean, given, they can barely administer an at-home essay.
Remember that when I talk about this stuff, I'm always talking about if it worked.
Right.
Now, I know what you're saying, which is practically.
Well, it doesn't.
You and I don't disagree on any of this. We agree that it would be great if it worked perfectly. It'd be fantastic. But practically, I've got a lot of questions about it.
Yeah, sure. Who wouldn't want to be able to take the LSAT from home? That'd be great. Imagine just the test anxiety itself that would minimize. But the delivery system has got a long way to go. It's in its adolescence at best.
Well, think about it. You're delivering, let's just say, a very small test group, 10,000 people, all at once, roughly, or, over the course of, an hour, difference from time zone to time zone. You're asking for a massive amount of resources to run something like that. A distributed system with that type of security, being able to deliver all the tests at the same time.
Yeah.
That's a big ask. I don't care if you're using Amazon's cloud system or Microsoft Azure or whatever, and you think it's 99% stable. you're still doing something that is unprecedented for what is being asked, this kind of live online scenario.
Yeah. And what was last November? 30-something thousand people, I think. So.
Well, somebody's internet goes down in the middle of the test. What happens to their score?
Yeah.
Is that just a cancellation? Or do you think there's a security issue? Did somebody try to steal the test? The questions are being streamed to somebody's computer. Are they trying to record it somehow? Do they have somebody else there that, was hiding under the desk? Yeah. LSAT writing doesn't have these kind of weaknesses because, look, they don't care about the writing prompt. They're like, fine, if anybody was reading it else or it got out in the public, we don't really care. We've done that before. We're okay with it. Actual LSAT questions, especially with a test that's non-disclosed, I just see so many problems with it.
Yeah. I mean, the writing is 35 minutes, and imagine all the horror stories and just wonkiness that we've seen. You told me the story of the guy whose cat walked through the room and he shoot it off. And it canceled his writing because they thought he was talking to somebody.
Mittens, stop it.
Yeah, get out of here.
Your writing is now canceled due to other person in the room. Yeah. Mittens is not a person.
It's a cat. I can see somebody in section 4 of an actual LSAT having that happen. And yeah, it's a disaster. So
yeah, well, mom pokes her head in.
Right.
Do you want a sandwich, dear?
You hungry?
Mom, get out. You just canceled my LSAT.
Yeah. So the ways in which that could fall apart in a hurry are pretty numerous.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
The more I talk about it, I'll be honest, the less likely it even becomes. I already thought it was a long shot. Yeah. Now I'm like, dude, that's so remote.
So online testing is not coming anytime soon. I think you and I would agree.
I think they'd love to be able to do it, especially with health concerns. They realize how useful it would be. Maybe they can, surprise me. I certainly think they've got much better capability now than they had, 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's possibilities here. I'm not going to get anyone's expectations up to think that in April or May they're going to be doing online tests.
I don't think there's going to be a quick workaround here, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'd be slack-jawed in amazement if they were able to do that and do it successfully.
Well, given how unslack-jawed you've been about everything so far, I don't count on that. Okay. I think the trend probably continues. So we've talked a lot about really what the fourth point was as we've gone through this, which is how it is that LSAC is working with schools and how schools are likely to respond to these delays. How we hope they'll respond, but also what's most, I think, realistic.
Yeah.
Do you have anything really further to add to that?
No, just echo what I said before, which is I hope they're aggressive about this. And I don't think it's going to happen immediately. Yeah. I don't expect Harvard to come out tomorrow and be like, we've opened up the window a little bit more, or your deposit deadline's been changed. In a week, they might. Mm-hmm. If you look at how things have changed in just the last 5 days, it's amazing, the exponential growth in terms of change. So in another week, you could start to see a lot of law schools who jump on this bandwagon of, we're here for the students.
Right.
As I said earlier, take a leadership role. Do it now. Don't do it later. Try to get out in front of this because it is definitely a difficult situation for students. The uncertainty is terrible. And I'm incredibly sympathetic to the students out there who are like, my test is canceled. I don't know whether April's happening. I'm hearing it might not. I'm trying to apply. I don't want to lose a year. Right. This is depressing. I'm sympathetic to them. And so anything that the powers that be, whether it's a law school or LSAC, can do to kind of assuage those problems would be fantastic.
Yeah. I don't know if this can be answered either globally or even just with much certainty, but what do you think this does to people who are currently waiting to hear back from schools, whether they're waitlisted and trying to get off or just looking for movement?
Well, if they had a March or April LSAT that they were hoping to use to kind of improve their position, for the time being, they're out of luck.
Sure.
I think that some schools are going to start making decisions, and that's going to be to the detriment of these people who are waiting in a lot of cases. If they'll give themselves 7 or 10 days, that's when they might decide we're going to open up the window a little bit. Maybe we don't need to force the timeline as much.
Yeah, but the fact that there are now not going to be any March test results pouring into these schools, do you think that speeds up the decision process for people who are currently in queue, in limbo? Or do you think that actually stalls it out further? Or is it maybe school by school?
I think probably what you have right now is this was just made known to the law schools this morning. They found out at the same time we did and all the students did. So that message was transmitted. So just today, they're like, oh, there's not going to be March results. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to focus heavily on the February results because they're going to feel like there's a decent chance that this may be the end of the crop, so to speak. Yeah. So I think these February results become much larger in comparison. At this point, I would imagine a lot of them are still debating it, but they may be thinking to themselves, March was the last test we're going to take. We're not getting any results to that, and those schools will probably begin making decisions now.
So, in that regard, it could actually speed the process up a bit.
It could. And unfortunately, for those of the students who were like looking for an improved result to kind of like change their position, and there were a lot of them, that hurts them. The same thing for schools who were thinking about taking April. They may wait until April 10th before they decide to pull the trigger on it in terms of making a decision. And at that point, they may say, all right, we're going to wait for April if it's going on. And if it's not going on, then we'll go ahead and start making our decisions now.
Yeah.
And again, this is using the information from today.
Right.
And I don't think the information from today is going to stay the same. I've said to you several times, it's going to get way worse. And at that point, law schools will start acting very differently under those kind of very pressurized and really elastic situations at that point.
As they cancel the entire fall semester.
I don't even want to go there.
That was said as a joke for anyone out there listening to it. I have zero information that's actually
way too far away.
Yeah, it could become reality. I don't expect that to happen. That's a joke.
Now, if you're a school that was going to use the results of June for any purpose, whether it's admissions, straight up applying, or whether it's wait list or what have you, or financial decisions, I think they're going to sit around and wait.
Yeah.
They're going to operate in the same exact way. They may have some fear that other schools are going to swoop in and take applicants earlier. So you might see a little bit of loosening. This is where it gets really difficult to know exactly what will happen. But if I was a school that was like, we'll use June, I'd probably sit tight and wait.
Yeah, it becomes a bit of like admissions chess in a way, where schools aren't just worried about themselves, they're worried about what other schools are doing, especially schools in their same like tier zone.
We had said on an earlier podcast that if they cancel March and not April, it's not the end of the world. If they cancel both of them, that's where you start to see effects. But the one kind of caveat to that is if they do cancel both of them, then we know that we're dealing with a situation that is way abnormal. Mm-hmm. The law schools will then start to account for that. And I'm hoping they do the right thing, ease deadlines across the board, extend application windows, and give students an opportunity to still get to school in the fall, which, you know, all jokes aside, will hopefully at that time, we hope that things will be a lot better.
Yeah, like I just
have a normal term.
You know, in a way, this just reverts back to the old familiar 4 tests a year system. If March and April go away, you've got February, then June. Schools have dealt with that exact scenario for decades.
Yeah, except for the fact that this time there were tests promised to fill this gap. And a lot of schools were looking for the results of this test to not just get more applicants, but to make some of these final decisions. And that's the difference. Yeah, it's kind of like it always has been, except they were promised something else.
It's not. Yeah. Well, strange times. It's the old, I can't remember if it was Chinese or an Irish sort of blessing / curse, which is may you live in interesting times. Here we are, my friend. Here we are.
We are. And you feel like we've covered it pretty well in terms of like the various outcomes and so forth and what could happen. I feel like we've gotten...
Yeah, we hit all the points, both of their release and our interpretation of it. All I can say at this point, aside from just reiterating for people to stay safe, is we'll keep you posted. You'll know as we do.
Yeah. I think what we're going to hear from LSAC right now is silence for a bit. Mm-hmm. They're going to go ahead and handle all the administrative tasks that relate to this. That's going to take a few days, so give them some time. And then if you can't take April or you need a refund or you need to push to a later test, that's when you start calling them and saying, let me take care of this. But I think they'll do the right thing with refunds and so forth, so I'm not too concerned about that.
I agree.
Let's hope that April doesn't get canceled, but if it does, you know, let's imagine that June will hopefully go on, and if not, that they've got something up their sleeve that'll allow them to administer these tests into the spring and summer. But if June gets canceled, essentially what occurs from an LSAC and law school standpoint is the application cycle for this year, the one that's closing right now, has officially ended. And then they're focused on the new cycle and the new window. And the pressure drops down tremendously at that point in terms of like, I've got to get my application in. Because right now you have people who are like, I want to get my app in. But they're trying to catch the last part of this window. And certainly there are people out there like, well, I've got other things going on that make it difficult to take the LSAT at certain times, but you will then have months before the next window opens up.
Right.
And I think they all know that, and so they'll start operating with that knowledge, which will reduce the pressure to get anything done. So we'll have to watch it because it'll change on a week-to-week basis, really.
Yeah, so we'll keep our finger to the pulse of all this and keep you guys informed as we learn more.
Those are the facts, Jack.
Jack. All right. Well, Dave, thanks for being right. I hate you for it.
Nah, you don't. You just wish you would have probably brought more groceries like I told you to.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to run low on things here shortly, but I'll figure it out.
Good luck down there. If you need to, before they lock down the whole state and country, you can always jump in your car and drive up here.
Okay. You're inviting a virus, but I'll consider it.
Yeah, that's right. You're actually not allowed to come up here.
I thought you would have locked that place down by now.
Oh, it is locked down. Okay. I was like, but you're a friend. But actually, you're not that good of a friend. No. So, yeah, I can't have you up here.
No, I wouldn't let me in either.
Oh, man. It's a full house. Sorry, John. I just realized
Totally understood. All right. Well, listen, you and your family be safe. I'm going to finish this Corona. Make sure the doors are locked.
The Corona tastes the same. A little bittersweet, maybe.
Bittersweet. All right.
Yeah, so, and to all of our listeners out there, you stay safe. Avoid other people. That's the easiest way to stay safe. Do all the things they say, like wash your hands and don't stand near people.
Yeah. Avoid me if you see me.
If you see John, he's like the typhoid Mary of a modern day for all sorts of different things.
Go patient zero right here. Thanks,
Be careful. All right, well, I think that does it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hopefully this was helpful. If there are any questions that you had that we didn't address, feel free to email those to us or tweet them at me or John. We're happy to try to address scenarios here and answer any questions that come up. If you do get a chance, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube, or anywhere else you may find it. And give us a rating. And again, that email is lsatpodcast@powerscore.com. We'd be happy to do what we can to help you out. On behalf of John and myself, take care, be safe. We'll talk to you soon.